A warm welcome to all attendees. My name is Valentin Rudloff and I'm part of the Climate Technology Center Network and will be hosting today's webinar. One administrative note before we start the webinar today: this webinar will be recorded and will also be published on the CTCN website, but no information on you personally will be disclosed there. It's just for others to be able to watch the recording after the webinar if they didn't have the possibility to join. Today's webinar number 6 on ensuring sustainable value chains through blockchain is part of a larger webinar series of 6 webinars on the topic of blockchain technology for climate policy implementation. The webinar series is running until today because today is the last webinar, and it touched on the topics such as blockchain 101, energy markets, mitigation, adaptation finance, carbon markets, and today value chains. The webinars are delivered by the UN Climate Technology Center Network in collaboration with our network member, the Blockchain and Climate Institute. Just a few words on the two institutions. The UN Climate Technology Center Network is the implementation arm of the UNFCCC technology mechanism. We as a center promote the accelerated transfer of environmentally sound technologies for low carbon and climate resilient development at the request of developing countries. And the CTCN provides technology solutions, capacity building, and advice on policy, legal, and regulatory frameworks tailored to the needs of individual countries by harnessing the expertise of our network of more than 650 institutions, technology companies, and institutions worldwide. On the other side, the Blockchain and Climate Institute, short BCI, is a volunteer-led not-for-profit organization founded at COP23 in 2017, and is combining the functions of a think and do tank and an advocacy group supporting governments and businesses in the deployment of blockchain and other emerging technologies in climate change policy implementation. A few words on its mission. Its mission is to effect positive changes by raising awareness among the international climate change policy community of the potential of blockchain technology to considerably enhance and accelerate climate actions. Coming to today's webinar, just a few words on the agenda of today, what we will be speaking about. We'll have about 20 minutes of introduction to the topic, followed by 3 times 15 minutes use case presentations, and we will close it with about 15 minutes Q&A session. Please do not hesitate to already put your questions during all along the webinar in the Q&A function. You can find this function at the very bottom, very right, the 3 dots. There you click on it and you see the Q&A function. Please just submit the questions already during the webinar. We will pick them up at the end. And I also want to take this opportunity to introduce today's speakers. Let me read out the bios so that they're correct. Starting with Mr. Alistair Marke. He is the Director General of the Blockchain and Climate Institute. He's a co-drafter of the ISO 14097 Climate Finance Standard and a UK representative on ISO 22739 Blockchain and Distributed Ledger Technologies Standard Working Groups. Passing to Boris Kalkal, he's an experienced senior architect at IBM AI Apps division, providing supply chain and asset management sustainable solutions. Previously, Boris worked as an information technology architect and financial compliance consultant in the financial services sector. Boris graduated from Nice Sophia Antiopolis University and Schema Business School in France. Passing to Eric van Ingen. Eric works as an innovation specialist on digital agriculture through frontier technologies such as blockchain, artificial intelligence, data analytics, IoT, and remote sensing in the FAO Office of Innovation. He drives the blockchain community of practice in FAO in collaboration with other UN entities such as IFD, WFP, and UNEN. Eric is especially interested in digital sustainability for the agri-food value chain, as well as interest in combating climate change and child labor in collaboration with the private sector. Before joining Fao, he worked for 10 years in the private sector in the Netherlands and Sweden as a software architect and project leader. And Eric holds a bachelor in telematics and obtained in 2020 a master's degree at the Open University in the Netherlands in business process management and IT. Passing to our last guest speaker of today, Rocio is program manager for the Climate Ledger Initiative and the project lead of the Wood Tracking Protocol. She is an experienced climate finance, climate strategy and policy, and carbon markets professional with previous engagements for South-South North, Vivid Economic, the Peruvian Ministry of Economy and Finance, and the Ministry of Environment, International Finance Corporation, Intermon, Oxfam, and Revenue Watch Institute. From 2016 to 2017, Rocio held an international climate fellowship from the Humboldt Foundation and was based in Berlin, Germany, working on climate finance. And Rocio holds an Master of Arts in Ecological Economics from the ICTA Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona and an MA in Public Management from the Universidad Pompeu Fabra Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona. These are our speakers of today, and I'm really excited already to hear about all the innovations with blockchain in the area of supply chains. And for now, this is enough from my side. I would like to hand over to Alistair Market to introduce the topic of today. Thank you. Over to you, Alistair.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone, depending where you are on this planet. Yeah, and welcome to this our last webinar in this series with CTCN together. And I'm Alistair Mark. I'm Director General of the Blockchain in Climate Institute. And then I'm here to give you a brief talk about. Let me share my screen first. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes, Alistair.
Okay, good. So anyway, okay. Yeah. So actually, before I joined this group to found BCI, I spent some time advising governments on supply chain transparency issues. So I'm here to share with you some of my viewpoints, observations on relevant innovations. Okay, yeah. So today, our supply chains are the central nervous system of the global economy and underpin the lifestyle and development of many nations. The global supply chain has seen enormous changes over the last 100 years. Every part of how we secure, manufacture, and transport goods has been transformed. From the introduction of new handling procedures to relying on ocean-going vessels, and from containerization to computerization, global supply chains are both more complex and more efficient than they've ever been. So let me clarify on the concept of supply chain and value chains first. So people often use supply chains and value chain synonymously, though the two terms are entirely quite different in approach and essence. The confusion, nevertheless, is because both networks have a few participants in common, such as logistics and the delivery process. In fact, a supply chain is a network of entities that source raw materials, transform them into finished goods, and then distribute or sell them to customers. So in contrast, a value chain refers to creating or adding value to the end product at every step, from conceptions through production to delivery and support. Supply chains are more of an operational management strategy than value chains that are actually part of business management. A streamlined supply network should entail the focus on minimizing cost, delivering on customer request, and ensuring customer satisfaction. Conversely, valued addition on the value chain emphasize on the innovation, testing, and marketing of a product to provide businesses with a competitive edge and increased customer value. One of the more useful illustration of the concepts of supply chain value chain is being shown on this slide. So to make it even easier for colleagues here to understand, so I would say that each step in the supply chain could contain different value chains. So I hope that that clarifies the concept a bit before I go any further. So let me go through the next slide. So let me talk about the challenges of today's supply chains. So each international trade operation triggers hundreds of processes, and as they are carried out, they are registered in the systems of each participant. Throughout the logistic chains, these data are replicated in the systems of each participant, where they are often re-entered into a new system. Today, in our globalized supply chain, we see multiple participants. They involve the validation of verified manufacturers, suppliers, distributors, and agents, etc. And the physical and digital supply chain are quite complex end-to-end nowadays, and there are hundreds of processes that I said, including the custom, declaration, quality assurance, etc. Yeah, the chain could be as complex as we can imagine, and the transactions are entered on multiple system. Data are replicated several times manually, meaning that they are prone for errors and delays on paper or even on PDF. So there is extensive accompanying paperwork or documentation associated with every single step of this supply chain process. And in real time, it's apparent that we are lack of the supply chains are lack of visibility to every stakeholders that would like to know more about what's been going on in supply chain. So, what's going on? Okay, particularly right now, we are dealing with COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the fragility of supply chains and the need for building resilience through our value chains. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare many of the long-standing vulnerability and risk lurking in the organizations' supply chains. In some cases, it has caused companies to take a hard look at their processes and their business models. In others, it has opened new opportunities for innovation, growth, and competitive advantage in the post-pandemic world. Overall, it's demonstrated the power of interconnected digital supply networks to enable organizations to anticipate, sense, and respond to unexpected changes and minimize their impacts. There are increasingly new demands from customers or in various stakeholders along the supply chains, which we include in general, that is to go 100% digital to support information product flow, as we are minimizing any physical contact with any stakeholder during the pandemic. Customer want to promote more localized production of the products, and would like to see the increase in agility to react to unpredictable changing demand or supply. And the most importantly, we would like to increase the circularity of all the materials along the supply chain. To illustrate circularity, I hope to talk about the circularity challenge. So currently, the linear supply chain model, which dominated our economy for over a century, has become unsustainable. 99% of consumer purchase becomes trash within the first 6 months of purchasing, which is a miserable failure, which also represents a miserable failure in material recovery. So circular economy here actually focuses on eliminating waste and overuse of resources with the 3R principles, including reduce, reuse, and recycle. And the circular economy economic system stress reuse, repair, and recycling in a closed loop system to reduce inputs, pollution, and other waste while minimizing carbon footprints. So there are ample possibilities for implementation if we can put a blockchain and also some other emerging digital technologies together to add value along the value chain at almost every single step of the supply chain. So let me first, before we talk about some standard elements or basic principles of the use of blockchain in supply chain value chain management, let me play the short concept explainer video to give you a taster of what I'm going to talk about.
Blockchain technology applied to products can significantly improve and enhance modern supply chains, thanks to its unique features. It provides an immutable, decentralized record of transactions shared between multiple participants, which, applied to modern supply chains, can provide innovative solutions in the following areas. Security, deterring food tampering, fraud and false advertising, aiding in mass recalls of contaminated items and identifying wastage in supply chains, decreasing chances of food spoiling. Traceability, allowing companies to certify and prove origins of products, ensuring quality and required standards. Time and cost reductions, the transparency and direct access to a shared platform, together with the ability to automate transactions, enables leaner and cheaper processes that are less prone for error. By leveraging blockchain technology, we have the opportunity to bring efficiency, accountability and trust to the most critical supply chains globally, from food to medical supplies to raw materials and manufacturing components.
Okay, this is just a very quick concept explainer about what I'm trying to talk about. So maybe some of, or even most of you have attended other webinars in our series. So actually, I don't want to spend too much time repeating what blockchain involves. So as just a very quick recap, so blockchain is a transaction processing technology that include at least three basic key features, including distributed ledger, smart contract, and consensus algorithms, which these are all the basic key features that support the operationalization of any transaction of the blockchain network. Theoretically, the possibility exists for a supply chain solutions to be extended to satisfy proof of origin, licensing, customs, and excise and quarantine requirements, among other trade facilitation requirements. These solutions are being actively investigated now by a number of national governments and regional consortia. So there are focus issues including interoperability, privacy, and security in the context of specific use cases for different sectoral supply chains, and also as far as we know, a lot of governments are actually quite concerned about how easy or difficult or how different their role will be in regulating the blockchain based registries to make it compatible with their current national legislation. Yeah, and then in the supply chain, for example, in containerized freight, we'll see stakeholders from ranging from exporter, transport, export authority, customs authority, forwarder, carrier, and consignee. And actually, the ISO 28000 series of standard released in year 2007 present a security management, give a standard for a security management system to ensure safety in supply chain, which is to be applied by organization of all sizes involved in manufacturing, service, storage, or transportation by air, rail, road, and sea, any stage of the production or supplied process. And these kind of model should be quite applicable to agriculture and food provenance as well. So, and on this supply chain, normally we see stakeholders like farm, transport, processor, transport distributor, transport again, retailer, digital supply chain, etc. So let me give you a schema on about what could happen if you use a blockchain in the supply chain. This could be a one common platform for all participants to track products or food product particularly along the along the supply and value chains. So it involves decentralized and secure tokenized system to link physical goods to information. We have to consider including the serial numbers, barcodes, RFID, RFID tags. It also involves assigning and verifying properties of products, tracking and matching products to documents involved in any trade by purchasing, through purchase orders, invoices, receipts, shipment orders, bills of lading, etc. And it also involves recording the quantity and transfer of ownership, involving units, boxes, containers, etc. So it could be as complex as we can imagine. So, but the diagram being shown on this slide right now just give you an idea what how the blockchain record could travel from the very point of origin to the buyer's table. So the benefits of applying a blockchain to supply chain management could include, on a day-to-day basis, the achievement of collaboration, agility, velocity, and visibility along the supply chain. And the use of blockchain could facilitate standardization in terms of data format industry-wide. It can also ease scheduled maintenance, repairs, and downtime because of its features around automation, particularly with the use of smart contract. And in times of disruption, the use of blockchain could improve recall management, manage breakdowns, react better to demand peaks, limit diversion, counterfeits, or enable a second or third sourcing alternatives. So in the meantime, I also like to cite an example of work which has been completed by the UN Center for Trade Facilitation and E-Business. They have, I believe they launched a blockchain white paper project back in May 2017 and has over 75 participating experts. The scope of this project was to look at how blockchain technology could be used to facilitate trade and related business processes, and how existing UN CFAX deliverables could be used by blockchain application developers, and possible changes to existing deliverable or new deliverables that could be considered in order to support blockchain trade facilitation related applications. So I'm sure you'll be able to do a search online to download this blockchain white paper later on. However, I would like to emphasize that a blockchain alone is meaningless unless you, of course, you'd have to tidy up your big data, and also also combine it with some other emerging technologies together to form one holistic application to suit the needs either in the local community or the supply chain or the entire sectors in which you want to operate. These emerging technologies do not go anywhere from big data, Internet of Things, cloud computing, edge computing, distributed computing, or even machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence. So without any of these complementary emerging technologies, using blockchain alone is not going to help you a lot. Okay, so instead of describing to you in very detailed how blockchain-based supply chain management works best, but instead, in order to set the scene for this webinar, I would like to just share with you the standard conceptual elements of contracting that involve smart contract automation with fish supply chain examples. So when we designed a blockchain-based supply chain management system with fishery in mind, we need to consider incorporating parties and identities which involve a know your customer KYC process as part of the very important identity management process to start with, and we'll also need to consider incorporating the quality of service elements, payment processes, potentially tokenization, Oracle, which could be Internet of Things sensors, which tracks the physical status of the fish stock that you would like to transport, the flow of asset that could come that could be tracked with the Oracle activating different smart contracts that you would want to include in this blockchain system, and then what I'm trying to suggest here is that by using by considering these basic conceptual elements for smart contract automation to monitor a fish stock supply chain, and you have to basically track the data or the status of your fish stock from farm to fork, or in the context of fish supply chain, that is from the point at which a fish is caught to the point at which fish is sold on truck, at border, and even and at market until they reach the customer's table. So this is in general a more complete model for against which we try to build up our own supply chain in the build up our own blockchain applications to optimize fish stock supply chain. There are some basic principles when we want to use blockchain to monitor fish supply chains, including the on-chain data flow, which include the use of DLT in asset management, payment process, identity management, and even certification process. So we should maintain different registries for different elements along the blockchain network. So these registries should be on a decentralized or distributed ledger, as this is on the blockchain, rather than being controlled by any one single party, in order to attract as much trust as possible along the entire supply chain. And however, no matter how wonderful we believe these blockchain applications could become, we have to consider Inco Terms. This this term I'm circling here, Inco Terms, against which we have to frame these contractual rules so that these smart contracts or in general a blockchain innovation could better aligned with the international standards. Okay, let me briefly talk about Inco Terms, which stands for International Commercial Terms, developed by the International Chamber of Commerce. The Inco Terms are standardized delivery clauses or forms of trade for international goods trade. These are issued by ICC. The current version from 2020, year 2020, served the contracting party as an aid to organize the transport of goods very transparently. There are a number of rules defining who is responsible for what during the international transactions. Inco Terms spell out all the tasks, risk, and costs involved during the transaction of goods from seller to buyer. They do not, however, indicate the ownership of the goods, which would normally move to the buyer when the payment is made. So on this slide, I just have include an excerpt of the Inco Term infographics that presents the risk the risk transfer, etc., under each rule that the seller and buyers agrees to choose when they engage in the transactions. Yeah, and then on this slide, this I think this is from Inco Docs, and then I believe this is a very good quick reference guide showcasing the transfer of risk under each rules to be chosen. But however, the main principle here is that the Inco Terms rule chosen in such a supply chain will impact the direction of risk transfer responsibilities, and hence the on-chain data flow and registry issues among stakeholders on the smart contracts. So in the interest of time, I would like to just to talk very briefly about the use of blockchain for increased sustainability in value chains. Supply chain sustainability refers to companies' effort to consider the environmental and human impacts of their product journey through the supply chain, from raw material sourcing to production, storage, delivery, and every transportation link in between. Though adding sustainability values in every step is essential. The goal here is to minimize environmental impacts from factors like energy usage, water consumption, waste production, while having a positive impact on the people and community in and around the operations. So therefore, it can the use of blockchain can help supply chain become more sustainable by adding values in uncovering slavery and exploitation, guaranteeing certified sustainable products, improving security, reducing plastic waste, enabling reuse, and also helping track and manage carbon emissions, etc. And there are, as I already talked about, the use of blockchain in fishing supply chain, but I'm sure one of our guest speakers will talk about timber, so I'm not going to say something that she will want to say. And an example that I can provide now is a Walmart's blockchain for shrimp value chain in India. Yeah, and I believe this use cases was piloted back in 2019, where the Walmart launched a pilot with Andhra Pradesh, which is an Indian province, seafood processors. The company was trying to help smallholder farmers to gain best aquaculture practices certification. So the program is in collaboration with IBM Food Trust Initiatives and allows smallholder farmers to export Walmart's membership-only retail warehouse Sam's Club's food safety program, which requires suppliers of seafood products to complete internationally recognized standard best aquaculture practices. However, I don't want to go into details because we have a guest speaker from IBM today, so he might want to talk about it or answer some questions about it later on. But anyway, I think that's the general basic element principles I would like to share in the context of the applicability of blockchain in supply and value chain management. So we're happy to take your questions afterwards. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alistair, for the introduction to today's topic. You already touched on you already built a few linkages to the presentations that we're about to hear. And to the audience, please, if you want to submit already your questions through the Q&A functionality, please submit it now, and we will pick it up later. Over to Boris Kalkal, who is coming from IBM, presenting a few case studies that IBM is working on. I'm really excited to hear about this. Alistair already gave a little preview. Boris, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Valentin. So today I will discuss a particular domain of our solution called IBM Blockchain Transparent Supply. This is kind of the generic name of it. I will illustrate this with some instantiation of the solution. Some apply to a whole industry, others address niche needs, and all of them embark sustainability goals set in common or individually by each of the participants. So I will first tell you how blockchain technology developed in the community and how we participated to it. I will then recap some fundamentals of the supply chain, although we already had a little bit of introduction already. I will talk about the challenges that impact pretty much all human activities on the planet related to supply chain. And after that, we'll see some examples of how companies addressed part or all of their sustainability objectives using blockchain and other technologies. I'm realizing that I did not share my video. Okay. All right. There it is. Okay. So let me first tell you about blockchain in a nutshell. IBM invested in blockchain back in 2015, 2016, developed with two other companies a blockchain called Hyperledger. This was subsequently donated to the open source community as a Linux Foundation project handled by the Hyperledger Foundation. Our objective at that time was to commoditize rapidly the infrastructure and then participate and rely on that common effort and build business solutions on top for industries. Ecosystems that spread horizontally have complex and very often suboptimal supply chains, right? Those that deal with perishable goods, human food or drugs are in addition exposed to regulations and increased risks such as food safety. Moreover, the consumer demand brings additional expectations to the supply chain, such as transparency with respect to carbon footprint or social impact. Now, the food ecosystem is probably the most challenging ecosystem with respect to these issues. Let's have a look at some of the figures from the FAO and WHO. Only 20% of CPG, of goods operations, are digitized. It means that 80% of it is mostly handled by paper and manual tasks. As per WHO, 1 out of 10 persons got sick last year from food, 1 out of 10. Now, as per FAO, there is 1 in 5 seafood products that is mislabeled worldwide, and it's actually even worse in New York City alone with 43%. And finally, a third of fresh food is thrown out because of poorly performing supply chain. Okay. So today, point-to-point solutions exist and operate properly between each participants of a supply chain, right? But as Alistair said, there is one thing is supply chain, the other is value chain. So holistic concerns are hard to tackle due to the variety of system of record, paper usage, intermediaries, and data isolation. So the big thing is that the blockchain technology meets the horizontal requirement of sustainability in the supply chain for all industries. Well, this is something what traditional supply chains cannot do. So how do you do that? Let me first share some best practices and learnings that we've had from the industries and people for whom we build projects on this technology. First, we took the Hyperledger fabric and we built on top a robust, secure, production-ready operational platform. Because at the end of the day, the requirements we get from customers are always the same in terms of security, availability, and so on. So that abstraction layer helps us getting rid of having our customer to deal with and with the nitty-gritty of the blockchain technology so that they can concentrate on their business. On top of that, we've added functions for tracing, handling industry-specific documents. It's very important. I'll come back to that. For inside inventory and also ways to give access through APIs to third parties and consumers when it's applicable. I will show examples of where IT is integrated all the way to the consumer. So this is done through the exposure of APIs. Basically, we listened to our customer needs and implemented what they asked for. But as Alistair said, the blockchain is not enough. Now, if you want everybody in, there must be benefit for all. Moreover, it has to be open, interoperable, scalable, and secure. So also, all the fundamentals must be totally addressed. Supply chain relies on de facto standards, right, like GS1 and EDI. And those standards have particular origin that actually resonates with the UN. Right, back in 1948, when Russian harassment blockading access to the city of Berlin were submitted to Security Council of the UN, the countries said that there were threat to peace within the meanings of Chapter 7 of the Charter. After that, NATO airlift began. And this airlift actually led to the creation of the fundamentals of supply chain protocols such as EDI, and those are still around today. These protocols are the core of supply chain as we know it. Hyperledger is an addition that addresses new concerns such as trust, transparency, traceability. And IBM's solution is adding security and reliability so that industry-wide platform can meet production level expectations. The ecosystem is fundamental. Walmart, Carrefour, Golden State Farm, Driscoll are some of the first players that joined the first implementation of Food Trust. Now there are around 300 participants to that platform. Everybody's coming with its own agenda in terms of what it's expecting in the platform, be it traceability, food safety, sustainability, or a combination of those. This platform unlocks tremendous improvement areas. Let's name a few with respect to the examples I will be showing you later. First, growers can share proof of origin. This is huge in some areas. By proving that their origin, they can also fund sustainable projects through mechanisms that we will see in some of the use cases later. Manufacturers and logistics, all the way to the retailer, can improve efficiency. Remember the waste I was talking before, hence reduce carbon footprint as well as waste. So when calculated and appreciated thoroughly, it reduces the impact of their business on the planet. Actually, the very same applies to other industries like the textile industry. I told you in the introduction that this platform was deployed in multiple industries. Textile is not much different from food. It's just some health regulation don't apply. Actually, some of them are in common with food. But the bulk of the supply chain operation is the same. It's about farmers to raw material to manufacturers to consumers. Designers in the middle are different and they don't exist in food. We'll see an example of a platform we've instantiated for particular needs. So blockchain unlocks transparency and traceability, hence enables sustainability. The blockchain technology meets the horizontal requirement of sustainability in the supply chain for all industry. This is what traditional supply chains cannot do. One of the big platform that we have instantiated for an industry is called Food Trust. So Walmart, Carrefour, and others started this, and now there are over 300 participants. Golden State is tracking freshness of beef using the platform and also technology like RFID, IoT. So as Alistair said, you need you need more things. You need data, you need AI, you need to analyze things and feed the system so that it brings that value. Walmart had a strong point regarding all the suppliers of leafy green that work with Walmart have to embark into that platform because they wanted to solve issues with food recalls. You can read the press, Google Walmart, and see what happened to them in the past. Carrefour is present in this platform for different reasons, for food, but also for cotton, because they also sell clothes in their stores. And Farmer Connect is I would say like a sub-implementation of Food Trust. It's running kind of in a separate environment because it addresses a specific needs in a subset of the industry. And I will get into some details about the case study right now. So it was tough selecting just a few case studies that could fit in this slot for today. So I made the choice to show you some of the smallest ones. So we're not going to see the big food trust with 300 participants. We'll have a look at Farmer Connect. Farmer Connect is a platform that humanizes consumption through technology using blockchain to promote their fair and transparent agriculture. It was led and initiated by Sukafina, who's a specialized coffee broker, and it was then joined by others. Farmer Connect is a specialized instance of the IRB and blockchain transparent food supply. It is similar to Food Trust, but organized separately. Sustainability, social impact, fair trade within the coffee business are the main objectives of this community-led platform. Although I don't have access to the private aspects of the solution, I can demonstrate to you the benefits as a consumer. So what I'm going to do, I'll use my phone and I will be sharing my cell phone with you guys. Hope I'm not receiving any phone calls in the middle. There. So you should all see my screen now. And what I'll do is, I don't have a pack of coffee, I don't get coffee around here, but I've got the QR code, so I'll be using this. So this is a QR code that is present on coffee. And so you can just scan it and connect. This is going to be in French. It's translating automatically. The system is supporting multi-language, and from there I get access to where this coffee is coming from, what's the origin, composition, who's working on it, who's been harvesting it in Honduras, who's the family working on the plantation here in San Sebastian. Who's working in Segafredo on this coffee development. It's actually a coffee that didn't change since 1914. And so you get also access to how the coffee traveled. So it began its life when it got harvested here in Honduras, in San Sebastian, and in San Miguelito. So there are two places where it gets harvested. Then it gets dispatched a little bit east in Arcala, still in Honduras, and then it gets prepared, meaning that they remove the red part and keep the green beans in the coffee, they clean it up, they sort them out, and then it moves again to get to the harbor to get exported all the way to Finland, Helsinki. So it gets to the harbor, then it gets to a storage facility in Espoo in west of Helsinki in order to get processed back in Helsinki for actual getting the beans to coffee. So that's how it gets tracked for this particular coffee, Storia from Segafredo. Now, if I have a look at another one, for example,
Boris, just sorry to interrupt. In the interest of time, if we can move to the second case study, that would be great.
okay, the only thing I wanted to add here
Sorry.
is that you can have, in addition to traceability, you can get also to finance and you can fund some of these sustainable projects from these farmers. Here, the two projects have already been funded. I'll stop sharing here. All right. Second use case I wanted to talk about is different business. It's Cayenne Cattle. It's a German company serving companies for professional apparels like chef, cooks, beauty salon, construction workers. So they create clothes for different professions. As they align their values with some of the UNICEF studies regarding cotton production, they were looking for a way to completely trace their cotton sourcing, which is their primary raw material. So they have deployed a dedicated IBM transparent supply platform similar to Farmer Connect, although it's not featuring rewarding and funding projects by end customer. I've got a short video. How much time do you have left?
Let's skip the video.
Okay.
Sorry, Boris.
It's all right. So the fact that big platforms like Food Trust, but also much smaller ones like Farmer Connect or other company-centric platform coexist is actually a proof that the technology is mature, efficient, and easy to deploy. It is positive for the future as it means incentive and compelling reasons such as regulation, consumer pressure, and corporate policies are just the missing components of a sustainable ecosystem. Technology is ready and can benefit human organization better address social and environmental sustainability. Thank you very much for your attention. If you want to know more, I encourage you to visit the website for Food Trust. There is also a very interesting solution brief on Food Trust that gets into the details of the solution. There are interactive demo, and there is even a value assessment calculator on the internet available for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Boris, and sorry for interrupting you again. I think we got the really interesting part on the demo of Farmer Connect out of the presentation, which was really a highlight already. And in the interest of time, I would already hand over to Eric now, who is joining us from FAO and presenting what FAO is doing in the area of blockchain. Over to you. You're on mute right now, Eric. If you can unmute yourself. You have to hover to the very top, and there's a drop down normally if you hover to the very top of your screen.
Okay, sorry for that.
No problem. Go ahead.
So thank you, CTN, for the invite to FAO to present to all of you. There are some good synergies with the previous speakers, so I may even win some time, and I guess Valentin will be happy with that. So first about what FAO has been writing on blockchain for climate action. So on the left, you see the presentation, the publication, which came out last year. I think it's a good read to get an idea of all the constructs which are out there when we talk about using blockchain for climate action. There are several models, for instance, for stakeholder engagement, for blockchain architectures, and so forth. It has a number of case studies, and that's also a good idea to get a better idea on how you can apply blockchain for climate. On the right, the publication is not directly climate related, but of course tokenization is a hot topic in in blockchain in general. And for instance, for climate, you can think of carbon tokens and so forth. So it's definitely very relevant also for the climate discussion that we are having today. Then this week, actually, when I was preparing for today, I had the pleasure to read this publication, which came out actually this week. And I can surely also recommend you this publication. It's from our colleagues from the UN Environment Programme in collaboration with the Social Alpha Foundation. And also this publication has a focus on energy, but I also believe that it's very relevant for sustainable for supply chains. And there are two case studies of which I found IOTA and the Eco 2 of particular interest. So yeah, if you're not booked for the weekend, please download this publication. The Eco 2 has a My Carbon app, and if you want to play with that one, it also gives you a good idea of how blockchain can come into the real world. And that's a kind of what Boris was also explaining with the farm app, that in the end, the consumer will probably not really see the blockchain, but the consumer will start using blockchain indirectly through all sorts of apps. And it's good to see this happening, that for instance, through Eco 2, which is in principle a blockchain, but what the consumer will notice is the app. From this publication, I also noticed a couple of trends in blockchain land, so to say. So the next generation blockchains do show specific characteristics. For instance, if you would go now if you want to use blockchain with Ethereum or Bitcoin or other public blockchains, you would have a low transaction speed and quite high transaction fees. So what I see happening with the new blockchains like IOTA and Eco 2 is that they have low transaction fees and high transaction speed. And also they really address the issue of the high carbon footprints of the current main big public blockchains out there. I have to say that this in general applies more to public blockchains than private blockchains, such as the IBM Food Trust platform from IBM. Then another characteristics is these new communities often tend to completely operate in the open space. So everything is on GitHub. And also the new one, Eco 2, which I didn't know actually till this week, is also fully published on GitHub, including their application layer and so forth. Then just one design principle, and this is also relevant for the discussion when it comes to public and private blockchains. If you would want to start thinking through how to apply blockchain, you don't need to be scared of that all that data will be in the public space. This is a design decision, and it often creates confusion. But you can actually design your system as such that you have really private data between two actors in the value chain, or you can share it in a transparent space where you have one specific supply chain exchanging data between them. Then when it comes to adaptation and climate adaptation and mitigation, what we notice actually that a lot of blockchain work is happening in the mitigation space. And also, for instance, the Eco 2 new initiative is mainly working in the mitigation space. And of course, we would like to see more work in the adaptation space as well. And for this presentation, I sometimes refer to, for instance, the climate adaptation technique or methodology of crop diversity, and what would it take to implement such a thing. Then in this presentation, we talk a little about Oracle's key data element standards and interoperability, and I will tell you more as we go. So regarding oracles, also Alistair and Boris actually referred to this. So a blockchain doesn't work on its own. You need a bigger, larger ecosystem. And so therefore on the left side, you see all sorts of integration points with APIs, which are out there on the web with market data, with all sorts of analytics systems, which are usually outside of the blockchain. And in this presentation, I use this beautiful picture of an oracle on the left side. So when it comes to different roles and responsibilities to make blockchain projects successful, we need all to collaborate. And for instance, at FAO, being a UN agency, we do see a role for ourselves to publish blockchain oracles. Not necessarily to set up a lot of blockchains. Of course, we are in favor of that. We would even do projects to that, but we probably would not run them by ourselves. And in relation to that, open models. So for instance, if we would all agree on open models for crop diversity, then we can publish them as oracles. And if then a certain country or even a farmer would claim that there is a crop diversity claim to make, we can have all these oracles verifying that indeed that farmer or that country has done a serious attempt to work on crop diversity in the context of climate adaptation. So this topic of what we call key data elements has been touched upon by both Alistair and Boris, which was good. So maybe you remember the slide of Alistair where he had all those different actors in the supply chain passing on all sorts of pieces of information. We started calling them key data elements, but you can also call them information elements or data attributes or data points. And I come back to the bigger context later. So if we start tracking key data elements, which for instance could also say something about the sustainability goals, then most likely one key data element would touch upon several sustainability goals. And so you cannot just map the SDGs one-to-one to a key data element. There's a lot of work which goes in there. But if we would start doing this work, we would actually serve all those purposes which are on the left, so which refer to as MRV, as ESG, or this complicated one, system of environmental economical accounting. So in the slide from Alistair, we saw actually all those key data elements which are necessary to have the supply chain running in its core. And sometimes I refer to them as key data elements for core business purposes. On top of it, or in addition, we would like to start designing a lot more key data elements for sustainability. And this is a kind of a rough list of the teams that we have identified. And this year, actually, we will work with a university to start operationalizing a bit more key data elements for child labor and for forestry. And for instance, for child labor, we work with proxies usually, which are then big data driven. And we could, for instance, start calculating the time that children need to travel to school. And if they travel a long time, there's probably a higher probability that they will deploy it for child labor. And that's just one example of how all these teams would need to be operationalized. Then in a broader context, and also this slide came in various flavors, also with Boris and Alistair. So on the bottom, we see the supply chain for the agri-food. Then on top of it, we have a cloud provider, which through a mobile apps or any other ICTs starts interacting with services which are out there, for instance, from IBM or from any other service providers. Then on the left, we hope that we can publish a lot of oracles which provide authoritative information on sustainability to this whole ecosystem, with the idea to publish relevant key data elements in the blockchain on the right side. For instance, here, IBM, if I want to be a bit more concrete, for instance, IBM is at this point with its platform covering probably all the blockchain itself, the cloud infrastructure with transactional services and mobile apps to interact with all the actors in the value chain. Then there's a lot of actors active also providing advisory service for farmers. And here also we could do a lot, for instance, with crop diversity. to tell a farmer how he can diversify his crops and then make a better and sustainable practice on his farm. So when we talk about key data elements, there's quite a dynamic going on. I observed over the years. Some are shouting we should never have new standards for key data elements, or standards are expensive, and then they kick off their own one, which is simpler and less expensive, or people just don't want to go into standards because they perceive that they are complicated. If on the left hand, we see something which is coming back in almost all blockchain publication. We need standards, guidelines, policies, and frameworks and legislations. And I still perceive this as a kind of a deadlock because we are still not really hitting the ground too much. And for instance, with the work on key data elements on forestry and labor, we hope to become a bit more concrete. But as FAO, we would also probably be reluctant to kick off another standards because there are already so many standards out there. So, and here I'm coming already to the end of my presentation. So the latest thinking is that we believe we should work a bit more on interoperability, and we are certainly not alone on pushing this agenda. Also, UNECE and GIZ in Germany are bringing this to the international table. That if we have all those standards, we need to start structuring this and think a bit more in layers of standards, and how the layers are presented here. And this actually comes from work from the European Commission, which we find actually relevant for this discussion. So there are a lot of standards out there also in the carbon space. For instance, the gold standard, there's Vera, there is the Recon network, or there are a lot of platforms for carbon trading and so forth. And sometimes they address them all, sometimes they are only on semantic level or technical level. But we definitely are actually considering whether we should do more work explicitly on interoperability, and definitely for the climate discussion, this could be very valuable to push forward. So this is my last slide, the takeaways. So the idea of interoperability to break the standards deadlock, the fact that there's a new generation blockchains coming up, which, for instance, addresses the low carbon footprint. Then what the role is for FAO or countries at the level of oracles. We surely believe that we should publish more oracles to provide good information to avoid garbage in, garbage out scenarios. And to be concrete, we do believe we need to identify all the key data elements which are relevant to come to sustainability in agriculture, but also for climate in general. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you. Over to you, Valentin.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for providing a perspective from the FAO side. We will right away proceed to the wood tracking protocol with Rocio, giving us a presentation for another about 15 minutes. We'll consume a bit of the Q&A time already, but I'm sure that we can also extend it maybe a bit if some of the speakers are available beyond the scheduled time today. Over to you, Rocio.
Thank you, Valentin, and thank you, everyone. So Eric, Boris, and Alastair gave me a nice framework to start this presentation. So I am a program manager at CLI, and at CLI, besides doing research, we are also producing or working on use cases. And yes, we have a couple of use cases in mitigation and only one in adaptation. So as Eric said, we really need to look for additional cases where new technology can be applied to adaptation. So having this in mind, I just want to give a quick introduction to the 5 use cases that we are working on before I move to the WTP. So we have this is the one on adaptation. So we work on the climate risk insurance in Kenya, which is focused on mobile phones and blockchain-based index insurance against climate impact for 50,000 smallholders in the country. So it works on satellite weather data, which trigger direct payments through smart contracts. We are also in Kenya. We work with low-cost sensors. The Kenyan team locally developing and manufacturing local cost air pollution sensors that allow us to monitor indoor air quality related to different cookstove technologies in about 100 slums in Nairobi. We are also working in India and also with clean cooking stoves equipped with cost-effective sensors to monitor cooking practice and transfer the data automatically to a DLT platform to calculate and validate climate impact. We are also having a project in Chile, which is called the Green Tracker. The Green Tracker is a blockchain platform that supports appropriate MRV practices in different sectors in the country. And then I will just explain or go a little bit further with the wood tracking protocol in Peru, which I am actually leading. And for that, I will share my screen. Just 1 second, please. So I trust that everyone is seeing it now.
Yes.
So Peru has one of the biggest forests in the country, and despite that, the share of wood-related GDP is minimum. This means that we are not being able to profit from one of the assets that Peru has. And this is also related to the fact that even though we do produce timber-related products or non-timber-related products, most of them are considered to have an illegal origin. And having that in mind, consumers are not consuming our goods because they are not from a legal origin, which becomes a problem because we cannot develop that industry. Besides this, that we cannot reach the international demand of timber and not timber products, illegal logging also destroys forest. This is not the main cause of deforestation, but this is a huge cause of degradation in the country. What we know from different research is that the illegal activities are happening throughout all the process of timber production in the country, from the harvest to the transport to the processing. And several national and subnational laws are being violated in the process. So we came with the wood tracking protocol, which is a system, a blockchain-based system that is tracking timber throughout the process of production. This is the third phase of the project. In the first phase, we focus on understanding the interest of the government and the industry for such a technology or for such an alternative. And we receive a very positive answer from different stakeholders. So we pass to a second phase that was focused on developing somehow theoretical systems. So maybe theoretical is not the right word because we developed the system, but based on our knowledge. And so we had this system and it was presented to these stakeholders that were initially consulted. And with this, we started a third phase, which is about piloting. I will skip this because thanks to my three predecessors, this should be clear for all of you now. So now we have adapted, thanks to the pilot, we have adapted our tool, the WTP tool, to the Peruvian workflow of timber. So we start with several of the agencies, of the national agencies. So for example, we start with OSINFOR, which is the national regulator for forestry, and they are supposed to have all the information of companies and communities, indigenous communities in this case, producing timber and non-timber related products. So the OSINFOR has all these registries. So we are, with this system, supposed to have all this information within the application. From then on, we trigger different process for different actors. So we work with the census of forest, which is fed by the companies, and then we pass to CERFOR, which is the National Service for Forestry, that follows the. No, okay. I'm sorry. So we are following different processes in the forest production, and the platform that we have developed include every single one of the steps that the legislation considers. So also, I will not focus on that, but our platform is able to use different ways or alternatives. So we have the Internet of Things, and there we are now using camera, sensor, satellite, and we can combine many of them to increase the spectrum of services that WTP tool is offering. And then we combine them with other aspects or alternatives that would allow us to increase the capacities for monitoring and tracking the wood. So this is what we have at the moment. So we start with the logging. So whenever we cut, or when the cutter cut the tree, then we take a picture of the tree. We made a calculation on the size of the tree and the wood that would be available for processing out of this tree. And all of this get registered into a first step in the process. And this needs to be validated. Of course, this is compared against the census that I mentioned before, because without this census, then and if we don't have information about this particular forest, about this particular tree, then the process is not valid, because there need to be a logical sequence of things. So first, we need to have register the forest or the tree for someone to be able to cut it. If that first step doesn't happen, then this cannot be entered into the blockchain. And you will see at different steps, we have different mechanisms that allow us to follow a coherent chain of activities. So we start with the logging, and then with the transport, and then with the processing, which we see here. So how does it work? There are only 3 simple steps, which the first one, as I mentioned already, is identifying the piece of wood. This piece of wood comes from a particular tree that comes from a particular registry that is already reported by the private company to OSINFOR, which is the national regulator. So for that, there is a coherent logical behind this piece of tree, and this piece of tree is associated to a QR code. And this information is added into our system, first by a picture, and then some additional information should be included manually, which is the species of the wood, which also have to be coherent to the type of wood that is being grown in this particular area or in this particular company. Then the size of the tree, which also need to be coherent with the volume of wood that we are going to get out of this tree. In addition to this, which I have already explained, there is a GPA's data, which also give us a stamp of the location and of the area. And finally, there is a third step, which is all of that gets into the system and is followed throughout the process of cutting the wood and then producing it. And not producing it, but moving it through the different points in the chain, which is in most cases it ended up in the capital city, right? So you have also the transportation process of the wood. So here is just screenshots of how the system looks like. Then we enter the number of the forest, which is once again what I explained, which is the particular code that this tree has for the registry of the company. Then this particular number can come from different instruments that the government allowed for registering trees. So we can the tool has been adapted to include any of this number, and any of this number can be included there. Then we identify, as you can see here in the pictures, we identify the piece of wood that is going to be cataloged in our system. And from then on, you can see there the registration of the tree, of the tree, right? So you have to the right column, there is the name of the species, then the date in which it was caught, the proceedings code, which is the number that I mentioned before, and then you have in this third row, you have the volume that was included, right? So you have all this information that again needs to be coherent from previous steps in order for it to be recorded in the system. And then you will see there that, as I mentioned also, this can, we recorded this information next to my house, but then you have it there, and you see where this is the place stamp that I was mentioning, right? We know from where this tree was cut. And then we have the history of the wood. As you said, I also mentioned it. We start in the jungle. These are it's real base data that starts in Madre de Dios, which is the border with Bolivia and Brazil. And from there, we can follow how the wood is transported to guarantee that this is the wood that we move from place A to B to be cut, to C to be processed, and to set, that is Lima, where it's going to be shipped somewhere else. And here to the right below, you will see the tree that we were mentioning, and then you will see the different aspects related to this tree. And that is pretty much it. It's really easy. And as I was explaining, this is a piloting phase, and this third pilot, we have been testing the tool in 3 regions in the Amazon area of Peru, and there we have worked with 4 different companies that have allowed us to understand the process that they have followed to register the information, right? So at this point, even though the information is going up into a cloud and into a blockchain, the most important thing that we have learned from here, from the piloting, is the digitalization aspects that we are helping with. So for the time being, this is just a paper trail process that is followed by form after form after form from different entities at the national level. So everything is recorded and signed by the responsible person, and at the end you deliver all these documents to the different authorities. What we have done now is that to turn these forms into one step in our application, which would delete or avoid all these paper and all these documents that are difficult to monitor and to evaluate the coherence from one to the other. So working with these 4 companies have allowed us to make our application real and usable, and not only usable, but useful for the companies and for the government. So we are now in these last weeks that we have of the project, having meetings with the representative of the Peruvian government to see how this can be adopted and scale up at the national level, to avoid duplications, because we do see for the private sector we do hear from the private sector that even though this is a great tool for them to make the process more efficient, at the moment, if the government does not adopt it, then they are doing it double, and it's only increasing their workload. So we actually need to go to the Peruvian government now. Even if but what we do know is that even if the Peruvian government doesn't want to accept it, there is also ways to use it for those companies that, despite the fact that the government is not using it, would be interested on using this tool to prove the legal origin, which would increase their income in the long run, because this would allow them to enter to additional markets where Peruvian wood is not allowed at the moment. And I just lessons learned from this piloting. It is just the importance of adding value to the private sector practices, right? At the moment, they do see value in doing this, but they, at this point in time, they just see it as an addition of the work load because the government has not adopted. And again, the importance of not duplicating with the government. This is what we did somehow at the second phase, but now what we have done is just to pair our app with the process by the government in order for the government to see that everything is reflected in the app and that not one piece of information that they consider valuable will be out of our application, and so they would not lose any information. And just to close, then you can read it here. Valentin, I don't think I'm late, but okay. But so the important thing is that we are here. We face a huge problem here, which is that in the jungle, in the Peruvian jungle, there is no access to internet. So we developed something like an offline platform that works like WhatsApp. Which means that you can, WhatsApp is it's still working. You can send a message and it will be sent, but it will only be uploaded whenever you reach internet again, which the people normally does after some days in cutting the trees, right? So the information is sent to the project. So we have an offline native application, which comes whenever comes online, uploads the information into the system and becomes immutable. So here I say, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rocio. Thank you for the great presentation. And it's good to have this combination also of more early stage projects besides bigger holistic projects led by IBM and having the perspective from FAO. I would invite all the speakers now to turn on their cameras again, and I will lead the Q&A session from my side. We have normally only 2 minutes left, but I would extend it a bit longer, 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes beyond the time that was initially agreed. So please, everybody who's interested, stay with us. And I would start right away with the first question, because one thing that struck me in all the presentations, and I think it became clear again in Eric's presentation, is there are different input values in the system. And a typical challenge that is always brought up and again with blockchain is the typical challenge of garbage in, garbage out. Especially in Rocio's context, with regards to wood, a manual input of a certain value of wood, for example, has a certain yeah, like tolerance of mistakes, and is somehow exposed to mistakes as well. So the first question is somehow, how do we try to, can we try to avoid garbage in, garbage out challenges in the future? And this specifically goes first to Boris, Eric, and Rocio, perhaps. Whoever wants to jump in first.
I could jump in, and I will maybe narrow down the conversation to retailers. Normally, in sophisticated operational system they have for supply chain, there is not much garbage. Why is that? Is because when it comes to food, it's highly regulated, and they've got to comply with some health regulations. So normally there is not. Where there is time and money wasted is in errors, in problems in the supply chain, or in suboptimal planning, not so much in data that is input and output. That's my short answer.
Okay, thanks, Boris. Over to you, Rocio, and then we go to Eric. Rocio, if you have an answer to it.
Oh, that's fine. I don't bring pressure at all. Valentin, work. So yes, I mean, in my pilot or in the WTP pilot, we all come back to a human error. So the digitalization, I mean, the typing, the kind of wood and stuff, cannot always happen, I would say. But for that, we are putting certain locks. So we have limit the areas where people can write information to the minimum, and we have and as I said, it's a chain of information that needs to be coherent with the previous step. Otherwise, the information cannot be recorded. Whenever we have a mismatch, then the system does not allow to continue unless that you modify previous data. And to modify that also needs to be coherent with the previous step. So having that in mind, we're trying to use that, but it is always possible, right? And with everything. But yeah, the idea of the blockchain is that it's tamper-proof. So it needs to allow to certain coherence in the process.
It might be also because the supply chain that you're working in is much less digitalized than the supply chains that Boris and IBM are working on at this stage, at least, perhaps. Not that I want to assume anything now about the work that IBM is doing in the context, but it seemed to me, based on the presentations at least. Eric, you also touched on the topic of garbage in, garbage out earlier, and you provided more or less a solution in half of a sentence to it from a FAO/government perspective. Could you maybe touch on this again?
Yes. So what was in my presentation, also in other presentation, that we need to rely on external services, which we call oracles, and if we just develop them all together with research institutions, and we deploy them at many levels, for instance, FAO corporate level, or at ministry level, at national level, even other levels, that's always good. Of course, I talked about the standards deadlock, but I do definitely recommend using standards and so forth to increase data quality. But maybe there's also another thing, like what's the definition of garbage? And for instance, when I talked about the child labor example, if we would, this is about a probability approach. It's not a certainty approach. So we indicate that in certain areas there is a high probability of child labor. It doesn't mean that the chocolate that you're eating with a stamp on it would 100% exclude that there is child labor. So calling it, but it's often happening fast that the press or any whatever say that it doesn't work because in this particular case we found that there was anyway child labor and so forth. So we need to think that through better, how to market maybe even this methodology. Over to you.
It probably also, just following up on your point, it probably also depends on the key data element, on the type of data, right, that we're trying to measure. Some are really defined number values, and others are more kind of a status or more environmental data, or so it really depends also on the data type of data. Alistair, do you want to add anything to this discussion from the BCI perspective?
Yes, yeah, I think this is the most fundamental issue that give us a lot of headaches over the past couple of years. So yeah, I very much agreed with what Eric says in terms of the necessity of standards, guidelines, frameworks, and legislation. So so on ISO levels, over the past couple of years, we've been trying to solve this issue by building on existing supply chain standard or complement the existing supply chain standard in order to solve this issue. One of the sticking point here is to ensure there's a legitimate connection between the physical asset and the digital asset on the blockchain. And this is according to my informal observation, this is actually the weakest link in many of the use cases we have we've seen so far. So actually, the garbage in, garbage out is a highly probable scenario, as we've seen a lot of points of failure along the supply chain. For example, when I went to a Japanese restaurant somewhere on this planet, I was very impressed that the QR code was printed on the seaweed. You can scan the seaweed with your phone, but the problem when we developed the standard, which is FYI is about to be released very soon, is drafted already. But yeah, so the problem that we need to consider is that how in a fishing stock supply chain or timber supply chain, how can we ensure that the seaweed or the tree that you scanned or the GPS has tracked actually produce that piece of timber or that salmon that really belongs to that fish or that tree? This is a very challenging issue technically, but we have to fix this issue in order to maximize the integrity of any blockchain applications here.
Thank you, Alistair, for your response. I think this comes down also again to the topic that has been mentioned across all the presentations, which is actually the intertwined kind of blockchain with other technologies such as IoT, for example. And I think this enables exactly what Boris mentioned earlier in the supply chains that IBM is working on, to have a reduced kind of fault rate because of the direct connection with IoT devices that are somehow measuring data points really on point without being perhaps manipulated or without having a human error there in the process essentially. Next question coming up, and then I will pick a few questions also from the chat. Just to follow up on what Boris said, and I think this was my main takeaway, very simple one, but my main takeaway of today. Blockchain helps transparency and hence enables sustainability. It's a very short and sweet description, I think. To your experience, Boris, the 300 or around 300 institutions that you're working with at the moment with IBM Food Trust, it seems at this stage as a quite voluntary move from these institutions to join their forces and enable transparency in supply chains. This might even go a bit beyond now the discussion of blockchain, but how do you think we can enhance this drive for transparency in supply chains?
Well, that's getting out of technology and into politics then. But yeah, because the thing is, technology speaking, we've done a lot, and there is probably more than enough around the table to do things, not even mentioning low techs, right? Which is another interesting aspect. Now, IBM is, as a company, is not giving any recommendation for getting things done. However, what we see is that the customers we deal with mostly react to regulation, right? As they have always done. They also react to customers and consumer demands and expectations, which is probably more interesting because demand and expectations often come before regulation. So that means they might be inclined in anticipating regulation. So that's a good thing, and we see them doing that, like Carrefour did for different things, whether it is for food or cotton. But as it is about reaction, it's disorganized. And as it is disorganized, it's hard to compare one action to another one. Hence, it's hard to appreciate the efficiency of what they do. It is out of our control as a company. It is just what we see.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for mentioning the topic regulations already. I think this narrows down a bit the question already that I anyways wanted to pass on to Eric and perhaps also to Rocio. What do you both think is the responsibility or the possibility of governments actually enhancing and supporting the drive for transparent supply chains, and specifically also for in the context of blockchain? I mean, Rocio, what you mentioned already, the experience with the ministries in Peru. What are some of the key challenges that you're facing there, and what do you think the ministry could be pushing for?
So I think it is key that they push it if they want to increase the market share of whatever product we are producing. So that is one thing. But yes, I also see that this is a long process, considering that this is super new technology. I heard that IBM is working from 1960 or something into this, but for many people this is considerably new, and they are not aware of the benefits, or it is not super clear for them. This is on one hand. Then we continue working on systems, so changing people's mind and having them try something new is not always easy for people. So that is why I was mentioning during my presentation that there is one first step, I think, that we are going, which is digitalization of the stuff. So this is a very good first step to bring the discussion into the next one, that we use that. What do we do with this digital stuff now? And then we can put it into a blockchain. But for the first time, this is what people people in the government is listening. Let's get rid of the paper trail and become digital. During the pandemic, we have seen. I think that the pandemic has helped us to accelerate this process, as many of the internal processes in the government, from migration, from passports, from IDs, have moved into a digital process in which you can now take your picture at home and the national government will take it in your ID, at least in Peru, to bring it to another areas. And then it is relevant as a first step.
Mm-hmm. Eric, anything to add?
Yeah, quickly on sustainability. The OECD and FAO are working together on what's called the responsible agriculture supply chain, and they also talk there a lot about the due diligence legislation. So a company can be due diligent, responsible for how the production in a complete other country is happening. So that's kind of the stick approach. And then the carrot approach is behind sustainability, there's coming increasingly a hard business case. So I think if you ask what governments could do, is to make the business aware of, first of all, the due diligence legislation, which is active, plus creating awareness on the business case behind sustainable agriculture.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. To wrap up the session of today and the Q&A session, and also to include the BCI perspective again, there's one question in the chat that I think BCI would probably be interested in responding, and also Eric. From Nolan Holder, how can blockchain technology be adopted in small island development states in regards to agriculture, given challenges such as limited availability to technology as compared to other developed countries? Any thoughts on this? I think this is a bit business as usual for BCI to help countries in the adoption of blockchain. So, Alistair, do you want to take a first stance?
Yes, this is a very standard question asked of me almost everywhere. So actually, it depends on how you designed your blockchain application. So let's put aside those regulatory or legislative issues first. In an enabling environment, so if the innovators could consider how to integrate the current 2G connections with the blockchain elements, that will be extremely helpful for 6 countries to enjoy the benefits of blockchain. So for example, I've heard that some residents can use their 2G mobile phone. I'm not talking about the smartphone. I'm just talking about the 2G mobile phones that have no internet connection, but at least you can receive or send SMS text. I hope people still remember what SMS is. Yeah. And then this kind of and then when for residents using those phones could purchase airtime from their mobile phone service provider for some kind of disaster risk insurance, and ultimately, and these SMS could in a way connected with the blockchain system from certain more technology advanced sport on an island state. That is possible. But in terms of the regulations about the role of governments in doing so, that's actually but thanks for the question from one of the audience. That actually reminds me of what the French president Mr. Macron said to kickstart the French EU presidency just this week. He says in the next 6 months, the EU wants to introduce the world's first law banning imports that contributed to deforestation. So this is a very interesting time to discuss these issues. Of course, we need to convince governments from favoring still the traditional customs paperwork in order to switch to a more digital model of custom clearance. This is I think this is a good time to talk about this with governments, which BC has been doing through some legislative amendments studied for many developing country government right now. But anyway, so I'll just stop here. Maybe Eric from FAO could have some other remarks.
Yeah, quickly. For small island development states and agriculture, I would certainly start with analyzing what are the cross-border value chains, and can you, for those commodities which are going there, ask a premium price. So it's the whole idea of using blockchain for those products of which the customer really wants to know its origins, and if he pays more, he wants to know what he's getting for it.
Thank you. Short and sweet answer, as you can say. Thank you, Eric. And with this, I would like to wrap up the webinar today and also the webinar series overall. And I would like to thank all the attendees who sticked with us through, even though we're already 15-20 minutes delayed, and also to all the attendees for all the panelists, obviously, for joining us today and presenting the status quo of blockchain in supply chains. And last but not least, also to the Blockchain Climate Institute and Alistair Markey here, the Director General present here, for organizing and leading this blockchain series together with the UN Climate Technology Center Network in the past weeks. We're looking forward to more collaboration, more exchange on this topic. Please, to all attendees, feel free to reach out to any of us if you have follow-up questions, if you have interesting project ideas, and so on. We are very happy to get in touch. And with this, I would like to close today's session. Thank you a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.